As far as the waivers to the 6-week rule, one of the interesting things that came up when we discussed this with our staff is we have a lot of military families that transfer into Georgia, and unfortunately when they transfer into Georgia, they want to take part in the scholarship program, but they would then have to enroll for 6 weeks in a public school only to then either try to get a scholarship or their kids are 6 weeks behind. We would like to see an exception made for military families. The children of military personnel have been transferred to Georgia to waive that 6-week requirement. Multi-year scholarships. So right now you have an SSO that might receive contributions designated for a particular school for the issuance of multi-year scholarships. And we want these students to know that the pipeline, has money in them and it won't be a year-to-year discretionary thing. So we like the fact that the SSOs now are requiring the schools to designate, well, who's going to get this multi-year scholarship? We just can't hold these funds as some sort of an endowment for any old student coming down the road. So, but the one shortfall right now, shortcoming of this is the SSOs should have to hold on to those hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some cases maybe $1 million, that's been designated for a particular school for multi-year scholarships. The SSO should be required to hold those rather than just upfront transfer $500,000 worth of contributions to a private school to be held in their bank account. And I trust our private schools explicitly, but that's a practice we don't engage in, and I can't imagine anybody being comfortable with that kind of money going to private schools to be held in their checking account or even a segregated account. Why not just have the SSOs hold them like they do all the other scholarships amount and award them on the annual basis, cut the checks on an annual basis? Again, language has been provided in that regard. It says, shall consider, maybe add the language, not be bound by the financial needs. Well, what evidence do we have that they've considered the financial needs? At Georgia Gold Scholarship Program, you could go and say, pull me the file on such and such, child. I want to see what their AGI was, and we'd be able to pull that file and say, well, here's what we considered. We considered their AGI. I would add a requirement that SSO should be required to maintain files evidencing the household income that they did consider, so that we know exactly that they aren't just saying they're doing it when really they aren't. Modest cap increase. We have 2,800 participants in the Georgia Gold Scholarship Program who have been informed on a weekly basis about the progress that these transparency and accountability measures are making through the Georgia General Assembly. They're heartened by the fact that this program is going to improve in terms of transparency and accountability, but they're starting to get a little disheartened by the fact that nobody wants to talk about a cap increase. And I understand fiscal notes, I understand budgetary concerns, but at the end of the day, Gold, Grace, Arete, some of the leading SSOs, their average scholarship amounts are less than $4,000 per student, less than the state pays per pupil to educate a child in the public school system. So I'd love to see a fiscal note as best can be performed to see exactly how much money we're saving in the state of Georgia, rather than everybody assuming this is some sort of budget buster, which it is not. These people have in good faith gotten behind these transparency and accountability measures. We've been responsible since the inception for practicing and helping design some of them and encouraging legislative support for them. I think it would be a sign of great good faith that this legislative body would consider increasing the cap that's available to these families. Right now, all of our schools are scrambling. That cap could probably be met July 1 of this year. That means thousands of Georgia taxpayers will not be able to take advantage of the program, and thousands of children won't be able to take advantage of the scholarship offerings.
This program has been talked about a lot in terms of being a cost savings to the state. That's obviously only true if we're talking about serving public school students. If we start subsidizing private education, I'm not sure we can make that claim. And so for all of us that maybe someday want to see the cap raised, we hope that we can demonstrate fiscal savings over time because we're serving students that would have otherwise been paid for by the state and public school. And as you've heard testimony here today by those that serve them, the average scholarship amounts tend to be lower than what the state would have spent anyway. So to the extent that that continues, we think that's a positive financial situation for the state, and we appreciate that clarity in the law. I think that some of the concerns that were raised about what evidence is there that student scholarship organizations actually considered financial means when they were awarding the scholarship is answered in the bill, since now we're asking the student scholarship organizations to report that data back out to the Department of Revenue. So as Mr. Kelly mentioned, a lot of the organizations that don't collect financial data now will have to start doing that to meet the reporting requirements. So perhaps that answers the question about how do you demonstrate that you did it? Well, you have to report out to the Department of Revenue those numbers, so theoretically you looked at them at some point when you were considering the applicants. And I think, though, if there were any area of concern for the bill, it would be, we probably agree with Mr. Kelly about private schools holding scholarship money for multi-year scholarships. It sounds like if GOAL is the largest organization and they wouldn't handle things that way, and maybe some of the other SSOs wouldn't as well, maybe it would be a small problem. But given that we audit the SSOs and we have oversight over them, we'd probably continue to like for them to have fiduciary responsibility over the money rather than the private school itself. Even though this is better than the current situation because it does require the private school to give the money back if the student changes schools or becomes ineligible for some reason. So it's a step better than where things may be right this minute, but if we had our 100% way, we would say student scholarship organizations maintaining control of those funds would probably be wise.
I would also ask that you keep the current cap. I'm sure that request does not come as a surprise. We have been in a tight budget situation for a long time, and the public schools have taken it on the chin. And even though you've tried to protect them from the cuts as much as you could, and they haven't been cut as much as some of the other agencies have. I know that originally there was a request that it go up to $80 million and work its way up from there with the Consumer Price Index. And I don't think the state has an extra $30 million. If you do, I'd like it to go to education, but I know you've got a bunch of other holes in the budget to deal with besides education. You have Medicaid in particular, and some other issues. And I do not think that it would be a fiscally wise move at this point to increase that cap. And so I would ask that you keep it where it is.
I would like to say that we would really like to see the cap raised. This is a win-win for the state and for the taxpayers, because the state is giving about $5,000 per student per year for public school. The scholarship organizations are giving somewhere between 3 and 4. That is saving you a lot of money every year from students that would not be in the public schools. So the state wins. They save money. The taxpayer is satisfied that they're giving their money to something that they believe will do a better job, will be more efficient. If we could do this with every government program, we'd be in great shape in this state. I know that's probably not possible with many things, but with this it is. And so I encourage us to do what we can. And then, of course, the parents and students are more satisfied getting the education that they have chosen instead of by their zip code. The means testing, we are 100% against the means testing, and I will tell you why. A friend of mine, I'll tell you about a little anecdote here. A friend of mine was in bookkeeping, and the boss was so excited because a young man working for him was going to get a raise that day. And the young guy comes in, and he calls him in his office, and both of them leave dejected. She finds out later that he refused the raise because it was going to take him off of peach care, his family off of peach care. He refused a raise. Now, are we going to have people all over the state refusing raises because they're going to lose their scholarship? And it was not a huge amount of a raise either, by the way. It was a few $1,000s, but it was going to set them up well for the future. And you see what I mean? It's just a very slippery slope there. So I would really encourage us not to do the means testing thing. I think that it has unintended consequences. And as was mentioned before, you know, a certain amount of income in one area of the state goes a lot further or a lot less far than a certain amount of income in another part of the state. So that could be a little bit confusing. I think that we need to stick to the main goals of what this bill is about. It's about fiscal responsibility for the state. It's also about social justice, about allowing students who otherwise couldn't afford to have school choice to have a choice. So that is all I've got. Thank you very much.
Good.